And sometimes I think we run from the hardships, we run from the painful stuff, the suffering, because we don't like how it feels. And while I can get that and I understand that, sometimes you don't understand that is what God is using to actually let you see who He is. To get into things, first question we got to ask is, what is a lukewarm Christian? By definition, a lukewarm Christian is someone who identifies as a Christian but does not fully commit to their faith. Also, it's someone who demonstrates half-hearted devotion to God and doesn't integrate their beliefs into daily life or showing any passion towards faith. So that's pretty much someone who is a lukewarm Christian. And it's interesting because if you would have asked me years ago if I would have considered myself lukewarm, I would have been like, no, absolutely not. But now, being in the space that I am in with Christ and just my relationship, I'm like, there was just so many things that made me lukewarm. It's crazy. So let's start off with, how did it start? How it started versus how it is now. So how it started was I gave my life to Christ at 13, got baptized. I did all of that in a Pentecostal church. So most of my Christianity was in a Pentecostal church in my teens. And so, as you know, if you haven't been through a Pentecostal church experience, just know, I don't know what it is today, but back then it was like super strict. There was like you couldn't wear any makeup, couldn't wear jewelry, couldn't wear pants as females. You couldn't listen to secular music. You couldn't watch really secular stuff. When it came to like Christmas and things like that, there was no Christmas tree, none of that stuff. So it was like super, super strict. And I just remember like going to church like 2 to 3 times a day, not 2 3 times, no, not a day, 2 to 3 times a week, including Sundays. You had like Bible study, you had youth, I think it was Youth Friday service, and you had like choir rehearsals because I was on the choir. But the crazy thing is, although I was doing all of that and I was actually like going to church constantly, singing on the choir, doing whatever was necessary, I didn't find myself like really grounded in Christ in the way that I should have been. You weren't really taught as much to necessarily read the word, actually spend devotional time with God. Prayer was something that you saw, but mostly it was either praying away something or praying for something. It wasn't necessarily like prayer in the sense of having conversation with God, praying and seeking God for His will, those sort of things. And yeah, so really and truly, like, that was like what my Christianity was like for like throughout my teen years and whatnot. And so I just found that it was just, that was the norm of church life. But it wasn't Christ-centered in the way of like transformation and sanctification and all the things. I didn't even see that even in the, adults that were going. I just kind of saw the hypocrisy of it all, where it's like at church, you're one way, and then at home or in private, you're a whole different way, or there was no change to you. You were just as vile as those that were, of the world. And so I just grew up in the church culture, but I didn't grow up in the actual, like I said, just real relationship with Christ, like transformation of your life type thing. And so I think that played a major role into, as I got older and went throughout high school and towards college, where it was just so easy for me to kind of assimilate with the world and assimilate to what my friends were doing who were non-believers, or just be the bare minimum of, a Christian. And so when I just look back over it, I'm just like, nothing inward of me changed that much as it should have. And then you have just, again, what you're learning in your personal environment at home, and then what you're learning outside in like high school. At this time, I moved to New York, so I actually grew up in Pine Hills, Orlando. And even then, when I was younger, I just went to church on Sundays because my mom sent me, but it wasn't like, as a kid, you're like, I'm sleeping most of the time, not really paying attention, playing with other kids. So church was never that place of like, again, radical change, radical, being radically like integrated into the experience of transforming your life actually through Christ. So, like I said, then you get into this super religious, traditional way of doing it, and still no interchange, just outer change. And so it's like, okay, you're just going from like one phase of Christianity to the next. And again, no real interchange. And so, yeah, so when I got into high school, it was just super easy to assimilate to what everybody else was doing. And I just looking back over, it was just like, especially in high school and like going into college, like I was just super embarrassed to even declare my faith, even to like really say I'm a Christian. Now, granted, most people knew because of just, I think I was just more conservative in a lot of ways. And so most people assume that you got to be some sort of like you come out of a Christian household to be more conservative in high school than usual. But it wasn't something I was just going around like, declaring and saying, oh, yes, I'm a Jesus follower or whatever. And I remember even like, I think it was like 11th or 12th grade, there was this girl that was also from a Pentecostal church. I actually think she knew people that went to my church, but she was like super Christian. And I was just like, I always looked at her and I was just like, how is it even possible in high school to be like that, like you're like that devoted? Like it was almost like she didn't even feel like she was an 11th or 12th grader. It was just like you're a whole adult, the way that you're like taking your life so seriously for Christ, right? And so that's what it looked like. That's how it felt to me, because I was just like, wow, like you're literally, it's almost like you have no temptations of like doing any of the things that normal kids are doing at 16, 17. Like you were just like full on, like it's like how you were in church is how you were in school. And I was just like, wow, that's quite interesting. And so, yeah, so I just felt like it was just embarrassing to kind of be that, because I felt like most people looked at her and were just like, like most people avoided her in that sense, or just was just like, joking on her, like joking about her being this like, super devoted, sold out for Christ kind of person. But they looked at it as like whack, right? Like in the New York culture, it's a little different because folks aren't as like Christ centered in general in the culture. And so when you have somebody like doing that, or like someone that actually represents that in school, it was very noticeable, and not noticeable in the right ways, right? In the best ways, because usually you're going to get joked on, you're going to get picked on, all the things. And so I just was just like, I don't want to fall into that kind of category. And so it was just so much easier for me to kind of like put it under the ropes. And again, just do what people were doing for the most part. Like I had my boundaries, I had my like limits, but it still wasn't enough. It was still like very much walking similar to them. And so, yeah, so then like I said, I was just kind of more worried about like falling into, that standing out. And I felt like standing out was like going to be in a negative way. And I didn't kind of want that kind of, bullying or not being accepted, because just my entire, like, I think childhood, I just kind of dealt with bullying in school, especially like, growing up in Pine Hills, and everybody's more hood, everybody's a little bit more different. And so when I'm not expressing myself in the same kind of ways, or I'm always the skinnier one, or always the one that sounded white, or always the one that, like just didn't fit in, I oftentimes was bullied. And a lot of the times, like, because I seem so timid and people like look at me and think, oh, you're just so kind spirited and all the things, like that attracted a lot of bullying. But then it was just like there was actually that part of me where I was actually rather stubborn and rather bold when it came to standing up for myself. And so a lot of the times I would get into fights and all the things. And it was kind of crazy when I just look back over it, because it was like, yeah, I didn't realize like I didn't have to stand up for myself in the ways that I thought I did, but it was just more so a survival mechanism. And so coming to New York, and it's kind of like that same hood culture, I was just like, I just don't feel like going through the same levels of like, it has to get to escalate to a fight, because I'm going to talk back, or I'm going to say something and the person's probably not going to like it. And in New York, it was just a little bit more different. I feel like, especially in high school, as you get older, like you had metal detectors and all kinds of stuff. You're just like, I don't know if it's even worth like, losing your life over. So I was just like, I'm not even gonna try to be the one to be out here standing out in a negative way. So yeah, so I oftentimes just like wanted to be accepted, and I just was like, whatever it took to do that, I was gonna do that. And so again, there was always those boundaries, and people still saw. I think I still stood out, unfortunately, because just me being me just stood out, right? Like especially just coming here at 13, like 12, 13, coming to New York, and so I'm not that like I'm not that far from just coming here, right? So it was like 3, 4 years in, you still kind of have a little bit of your Southern accent. You still have that. Again, you're still like, you look a little bit more reserved. I think I still stood out anyway, but I think my avoidance to standing out was just one of the things that I just was so adamant about. So, yeah, so then when I just realized like just who I am is what's making me stand out, just being kind and, like just a little bit more, I guess, what would be the word, compassionate and considerate and all the things that most kids aren't in New York. I just realized I just started becoming more like my environment. So I became more of I wouldn't say it would be more of a chameleon, because I think it was things that were deep down inside, but I just didn't always bring them to the surface. So when I found people that were like popular, or that were like the jokesters, or that were, the ones that people oftentimes always wanted to hang around, I just kind of became that environment. So then when it's like, I became a little bit more carefree. I became a little bit more promiscuous, not with sleeping with people, but just like, dating and kissing and doing all the things. I really became more into like darker, angrier music. Which was just like, it brought you like, a little, I think it gave you a different headspace. Like you walked around angry, not realizing that that was actually just fueling further the things that I actually was dealing at home with. And so like all the things that I just allowed, or that I was just repressing and turning into anger and warping into anger. At first it was really like, I think coming to New York put me into this like the rap hip hop culture kind of vibe. So like you had people that were like 50 Cent and I don't remember who's like a lot of people. Oh, 50 Cent, like Eminem and, Dr. Dre and all of those people. But then I went like really dark into like Evanescence and like the Paramore and all of these other people, which were like really dark. Like at some points, sometimes when I think like a couple of years ago when I actually listened to some of the lyrics, I was like, wow, I'm actually shocked. I didn't even like, do more than I did, because like some of these lyrics was like dark, but I could connect because it's how I felt. Because when I dealt with like the verbal abuse and the emotional abuse and whatnot in my household constantly, it was like I didn't realize how much of that I wasn't filtering out. And so you thought going to church and doing all this stuff was actually helping. But again, I wasn't really doing things that were consecrating me. I wasn't really doing things that were transforming me. So technically, I was just using church as like a Band-Aid. And then I'm just like repressing all of the things because I'm not talking back. Because again, in church, you're taught like honor your mother and your father, and you're not supposed to talk back, and you're not supposed to do this, or you're not supposed to do that. So you're receiving all of the negative words, all of the things that's being said to you, all of the things that's being done vilely to you. And then you're just like, it's building up the anger, it's building up the resentment, it's building up the unforgiveness. And then you're listening to the music that's also further just justifying why you should be unforgiving and why you should be angry. And so it was just like a whole mess. So then I realized like I just started using like words or being like manipulative towards people. I started like deceiving people in the way of just like, trying to embarrass them. So I would just like with guys, I would just be out here like breaking up with guys in front of everybody just so that they can be laughed at. Like it was just really terrible, guys. Like I was, I was really on one, like really on one. And so yeah, so I just realized that I didn't realize how much I was becoming really like selfish and self-centered. And so now just looking back at it, it's like, yeah, again, that lack of transformation. So it's the doing of the things that makes you look good. But at the same time, it's like, where is the real change happening inward? Because as life goes and things go and people, do things or say things or just life gets hard, if you're not, again, transforming and renewing your mind daily, then really and truly you're just building up all of these things to just further, again, create more of a darker hole, more of a darker space. And so you're wondering why there's like mental health and all the things. Is because we're just allowing life to bombard us, and we're allowing just the things that we're, consuming to bombard us, not taking into account and being accountable for, like, what am I watching? What am I listening to? Like, what am I, allowing to go in my ears? What am I allowing to see? What am I allowing to, you know what I mean? So yeah, so like I said, like I just really became more selfish, really became more self-centered. I started using people in a lot of ways. And again, these are things that I'm seeing in my household and that have been done to me, and I'm not realizing that, oh, things like those affect you, like your environments affect you too. And so if you're not careful, you actually start replicating the same things, the same environments you came out of. And so I just started using people, like whether it's friends or relationships, started getting into like gossiping and, again, like embarrassing people. I just got into like instigating conflicts. So I wasn't one that wanted to fight, but I would instigate fights or instigate conflict and division. Just manipulating others, like I said, to embarrass them, and just being devious and whatnot, just to fit in and kind of just be with the crowd and be with the ones that, were cool, or that were always, again, being bullies, right, themselves. And so I guess I decided, like, it's best to be a bully than to be bullied. And so that was kind of like, I think, my internal motto, right? So yeah, so honestly, the honest truth I had to come by was just that, like, why wasn't I really professing my Christianity? Like, I just really found it, like I said, I was ashamed of it. I was like turned off by it in ways, because I just saw a lot of hypocrisy in the church culture that I grew up in. Like seeing certain people, like family members, be in church and, they're speaking in tongues and getting laid out on the floor and, like quoting the scriptures, and then they come home and they're fighting and arguing and like being nasty and vile and just so many things. So I think I just was just like, is like church is fake almost. And while my heart posture was towards God and wanting God, it just was so hard to see past the hypocrisy that I've just seen throughout leadership, throughout just like I said, people that were family members, just like so many different things. And so there was that. Then there was just the fear of being viewed as boring or, plain or just like the girl that like, can't do nothing. I think those were the pressures of that I was dealing with as well, just in high school, just trying to, again, fit in. And then I'm gonna be honest, I found it whack. I found it whack because I was just like, why should I strive to be like Christ? And the people that are supposed to be more like Christ than me, like adults or people that have been in the faith for how long, is being nothing like Christ. And I was just like, why do I need to even attain to be something that these folks is clearly not trying to be? Because it feels like I'm the one getting the short end of the stick. Because if I'm trying to turn the other cheek, but you keep hitting me, it's like, so then what's the point of me turning the other cheek? Like, I just felt like it was just whack to be that full out sold out, because why? Like, what kind of life would I be enjoying? What kind of life, you know what I mean? Like, I think at that time, I just was just like, what kind of life would I be enjoying? Why would I need to do this if I'm just feeling like, oh, it's just suffering and I'm not even like gaining nothing from this? You know what I mean? So I think that was like my thought process, if I'm honest. And it was just like, yeah, throughout that time from like 16, so that's like 11th grade, all the way throughout college, really. Like, I really just was, like not really trying to be like as devoted. I just kind of found myself getting further and further kind of away from, just being a Christian. I went to church, absolutely. And I think especially during hard times, I gravitated closer to God in moments. But was I consistent? No. Was I devoted? No. And again, I wasn't really like professing it or claiming it. Like, most people wouldn't even know if I didn't, if it wasn't for just people thinking like you have to be because you're a little bit more conservative or whatever the case is. So yeah, so that was like a lot of like a large gap of time. I think especially again, like I think, and now looking back now, I think it was just a lot of anger towards God I had, which is why I was, I found it easier to kind of just put it on the side, because I was just like, Lord, like I'm going through so much abuse at home, in my household, just verbally and all the things. And it's like, you're never allowing anything to work for me. Like, where's the vengeance towards my enemies? Where's the, safety net? Where's the, keeping me safe? And, like David, like, where's the scooping me up from my enemies kind of thing? It's like, you're the ultimate father. I didn't choose my parents. You chose them. And so it's like, I'm just like stuck in this, like, being with an alcoholic father and just a mother that just, really just was like rejecting me. And it's just like, you going through all of this and you're just like, well, what kind of God are you? Not for nothing. I think I was just really mad at God and I didn't realize it. And so again, because I was never taught to be honest in prayer, I was never taught to really express my honest truth to God, how I really felt. I never was taught to like actually, when I had a certain issue or when I felt a certain way, to actually go to God and not go to other things or not go to other people, not find comforts in other things. So I think it was just a lot of, I didn't realize I was avoiding God really because I was angry with him, because I didn't understand his plan. I didn't understand his ways. I didn't understand why he was allowing me to go through certain things and like, dealing with so much depression and anxiety because of all of it. And just going through the motions of like, one moment you're good, the next moment you're like, you're bedridden and you barely can eat for like 2 months, and you're just going through like the sunken place. And it's just like, it's just the cycles. So I think now looking back, I realized it was just really anger, which is what brought on the rebellion. And so I was like, it's just better to be in the world. It feels better to be in the world than to even, again, be proclaiming Christ, to be really like about it, be really sold out for him. And so fast forward all of that, and we get to where God starts dealing with me. And so it's like 2016. And at this point, I'm going to school, but barely making it. And I'm working full time at Chase. And so I'm just, again, trying to finish school, but not really, as like, there's just, again, the bouts of depression and all the things just really made it hard to like focus, to really have the passion for it. At that time I was doing psychology. So at that time I wanted to actually, be a school psychologist and actually help other kids who were going through like mental and verbal and all the things, all those abuses. And so, I was really passionate about it, but then there were times where it was just like the fire was just lit out of me. I wasn't really passionate. So I was doing well in certain periods, and then at certain periods I'd be failing, not really wanting to go to class, not being able to go to class because, again, going through bouts of depression, all the stuff. So at that time, I was like barely making it on a thread on school, but I was working full time at Chase. And God started dealing with me and orchestrated literally like my parents leaving. So first my mom and brother leaves to go to Florida. They moved back to Florida. My dad leaves shortly after that. So at this point, I'm actually left to fend on my own. Didn't think I would. I always knew that that's eventually the thing, because again, you want to get out of that house. But I don't think I was yet prepared, because again, financially, being in New York, it's a little bit more tougher. It's tougher to kind of get on your feet. And so I wasn't really ready or expecting at that time. So kind of arranged to have, me and my husband, at that time he was my boyfriend, and we lived with my sister, and we went through all of that. It was a whole bunch of stuff that happened, ended up going back to a family friend. And then it was just like a whole bunch of stuff happened. And then eventually got on our own. By the grace of God, we was able to like get an apartment. And it was in that moment, at that time, where he isolated me, which I realize now he orchestrated. He orchestrated us right into the wilderness. And I promise you that like it was crazy. Like he started stripping me away of everything. Like, again, first he started with family, so that was in phases. Then he starting with finances. That was another phases. Like it got to a point where, we were literally on like the system, public assistance, had no money, had no credits. No support. We had to do weekly trips to like the job center. Like it was crazy. We had to do back to work programs. We had to do what you call it, rental assistance, yeah, SNAP. Then after that, you during that time, matter of fact, in that time, it's prophesied that we're gonna have a son. I'm like, why would that be right now? Have my son, then you're going through the motions of all of these things in the midst of having a kid. So think about like all the things, the responsibilities, all the stuff that happens with that. Then you have my son being they say verbally delayed, so he wasn't really speaking as quickly as they said he's supposed to speak. So then you have that and going through speech therapy. Like it was just an array of different things. And so I just think I was just like, God, it's like looking like my life is turned upside down and I just don't understand it. But it was honestly though, in those hardships and that season, that wilderness season was for a good 8 years or so. And so I remember it being so crazy, but at first it was so painful, so like frustrating, so many feelings. I don't even know how many emotions I probably went through at that time. And I just prayed, and it was like God wasn't changing it. And it was over time though that I think at that time when I was going, me and my husband were going to the church that where the prophet prophesied about, I started kind of really cultivating my relationship with Christ more. And I think in a different way this time, though, I think I had more time. I had more time to spend more time. I had more time to seek his face. At first, I started off with seeking his hand until it seeped over into seeking his face. And so it was just like a different level of relationship that I built in that wilderness season. And so now looking back on it, it was like, yeah, there was so much turmoil and so much chaos and so much stuff happening. But at the same time, I literally stumbled on really a solid relationship because, again, I went back to my foundation. Like, this is something that I did from the age of 13. So I knew, I knew how to pray. I knew going to God. I used to write like in my journals and write poems and all the things. But it was not until in that moment that I really learned about like how to really pray. Is that in that moment that I really started watching sermons and really like learning the word and really just like really walking the thing out. And so, yeah, so much happened in the wilderness that radically transformed so much of my thought process and all the things. And even in the midst of all of that, I still was lukewarm, which is interesting because I found myself lukewarm in other ways. So it wasn't being like the world and all the things, but it was more so not necessarily, again, not necessarily sharing the gospel, not necessarily putting God in all things, not necessarily, not necessarily, again, being fully, devoted to Christ and kind of denying him in some ways as well. And so there was still those parts that were still needing to be filled and really needing to be changed. So when I eventually stumbled on blogging, food blogging, that was like in 2017 or so, or 2018, around there. And so I stumbled on food blogging, still with no money or nothing. And God was just like, he put it in my heart, the desire, the idea. And so I started it. Crazy. Me and my husband had no clue about photography, cooking. I couldn't even cook. It was just so wild. So I was just like, we're just going to try to make this thing work and see where it goes. So I just remember doing all of the things, just constantly being devoted to it, like just cooking whatever we could, photographing whatever we could, and just kind of like, slowly doing this thing. And then there were times, I think it was after like 2020, it was in the end of 2019, 2020, I started being like, man, like, I feel like I want to just kind of like post something about God or whatever, but I don't know how to really fuse the two because like this has become, like a food blog and it's all about food and people, that's what they want. And I don't want to deter people. I don't want to turn people away or turn them off by like coming to this space and it's something totally different because, religion is something that really can like, deter people. And so I was wrestling with it for a while and then I was like, you know what? whatever, like, let me, like, it's part of me, and I can't like continue to just, suppress it and just pretend like this is all that I'm about, which is food. And so I was just like, you know what, I'm gonna make a post or whatever. And I just was honest and open, and I was just so surprised by the reception of it. And I was like, whoa, like, people actually are receiving it, like, they're not necessarily pushing back. So it kind of opened that doorway for it to be like, oh, you can, like, although you don't see it happening, like, you can actually do it. And so it was like 2020 happens. We all know that the pandemic and all that stuff happened. And like, that's when I really cultivated my relationship with Christ even more. And at that time, my parents had already come back. So they were already back in New York. And so I was still dealing with a lot of the things. It wasn't as crazy as when I was living with them, but it still was a lot of the stuff that I was dealing with before. And so there was always that thing of like having to turn the other cheek and honoring them and doing all the things. And so I just remember just really cultivating my relationship with Christ in that moment, because I was just like, man, like, obviously it just feels like I just need to be closer to the Lord. Like, I need to have him guide me. I needed to have him really do a lot of the things that I needed in my heart, in my life, just the acceptance and all the things. Like, I could no longer depend on people or depend on, people to love you the right way or to support you in any way or to bless you or whatever. And so I just was like, you know what, let me just like really, really cultivate it even further. And so, so at that time, like I said, I started to kind of build Orchids and Sweet Tea at that time. It started to really take traction in like 2021, 2022. And I just was like, I have to make the greatest faith move or one of the greatest faith moves that I've made. And that was just like starting to incorporate Christ. And it was a very scary thing for me to do because, again, I wasn't sure how people were going to receive it. It's one thing to do one post, but when you're trying to be out here doing like posts ever so often and it's becoming more frequent in a space, again, that you don't see that, I was just afraid, like, I don't want to lose all that I've worked for. And, we're building and it's working and we're gaining traction and all the things. And I just was like, you know what? But again, this is my real life. This is like my personal life. And so for me to be fully authentic and show up as me on the platform that God gave me, I got to be me. And so I started like posting and really talking about Christ and all the things. And, it got some good and it got some bad. Right. And so I was just like, it is what it is, though, because at this point, I'm getting more locked in with Christ. I'm getting more locked in with God. I'm praying more and doing all the things. And so, so then I was like, I started to really lock in. And that's when I really saw the growth and I really saw God's hand on Orchids and Sweet Tea, the more that I locked in and really gave him more glory for things. And so after that, I began declaring my faith in the food space, and that was insane because, again, like I said, you didn't see it, especially as a Black food blogger. You're already at what do you call it? You're already at a disadvantage when it comes to just success and popularity and all the things. So judge adding Jesus to it. Like, I feel like it was like, oh, you're about to dissipate into the thin air because, again, Jesus is that name that really gets people going. And so I was like, you know what? At the end of the day, it doesn't matter. Like, I felt God was just like, yo, I got to put him first. And I just felt convicted to really put him first. And so I started doing that. And my relationship started getting super intense with Jesus. And I realized that God was really just using my circumstances to cultivate that and draw me in closer. So the wilderness was really the wilderness because he wanted me to actually learn him for real in a real way. And sometimes I think we run from the hardships, we run from the painful stuff, the suffering, because we don't like how it feels. And while I can get that and I understand that, sometimes you don't understand that is what God is using to actually let you see who he is. So it's like, you can't say he's Jehovah Jireh if you've never had him, you've never needed him to provide. You can't say that he's a healer if you've never been sick and needed his healing. You can't say that he's a good father if you've never had a situation where you needed a father that wasn't there, but he showed up. Like, I think we don't understand that, like, in order for us to see God for the things and the names that he is, we have to be in those circumstances, right? Like, that's how he works. So a lot of the times he uses the things that he's not causing things to happen. He's not causing the bad things to happen, but he's using the things that the enemy has tried to use for our good. And the good is to be closer to him, to be more dependent on him, to trust him more. And so I realized in just the wilderness season and how I had to still build in the midst of the wilderness and trust him for manna and, trust him in every opportunity that he was like, I'm going to give you the next opportunity. And that's going to cover what you need for that moment. And then you're going to get another one. And that's going to cover, literally it was like manna. And it was like every opportunity literally covered and met the need. But it wasn't enough for abundance. And I had to still build and I had to still trust and I had to still keep going in the midst of that. And so when I just thought about it, it was just like, yeah, now I can see how much he was just using those things. And it definitely cultivated my relationship even closer and better than I ever thought that it would. And in the moment, it didn't feel like it. It felt like the complete opposite. It felt frustrating. Yes, I had moments of frustration. I had moments of anger. And that's when I think I realized there was a lot of heart stuff that I didn't deal with. I was just dealing with the surface things and meeting my surface needs, but I wasn't dealing with the heart stuff. And then it became to a point where I got really close with him and he started dealing with the heart stuff. Now, that's the stuff that was really crazy because you don't realize how much stuff you actually have in your heart until he uses circumstances or people to draw it out at the surface so that you can see and you can repent for it and you can really change it. And so he began working on the heart stuff and he started showing me he used circumstances and people to show me my pride, jealousy, envy that I've had, unforgiveness, lack of mercy for people, my lack of integrity when it came to whether it was business or whether it was just as a person, like not being a person of my word, saying I make a promise and not really keeping it or not really caring because I changed my mind in a moment and I was just like, I don't feel like it. There was the timidity part of it where it was like, again, not being bold with like declaring that I'm a Christ follower, not being bold in communication with others about how I feel, whether especially when it's a negative feeling. It was just the double-mindedness of like being like, I'm for Jesus and all the things, but then I allow fear and other things or the world to dictate my actions versus really walking and standing on faith. It was just so many different things that he just really began showing me in the midst of just, really working on, again, still building, still cultivating relationships, still, maneuvering through life challenges and the wilderness. But he was just like, yeah, I'm going to show you your heart because, again, God cares way more about our heart posture, our heart condition than he does anything else. Like the other things, the money and the, provisions and the friendships and relationships and all those things are super easy for him to do. But when it comes to the heart stuff, he's like, I want to focus on that first because when I give you the blessings, I want the blessings to be stewarded well. And they can only be stewarded well when your heart is well. When you just look at it, you just can go to like Romans, you can think back on like Romans 8:28, where it says, all things work together for the good of those who love God according to his purpose, right? And so again, like I said, it's really about just drawing us closer and deeper into relationship with the Lord. And so, yeah, looking back now, I can say, yeah, it was good for me that I was afflicted. But in the moment, did I say that? No, it was a lot of frustrations and hardships and all the things. And it was not until I realized there was so many idols and so much rebellion that I was doing and so much disobedience, right? Because I thought, I had the notion of, oh, well, God, you just suggesting something versus it's like, no, it's a request. Like he's actually saying, I need you to do this and I need you to be obedient. And so when I just was, again, my pride just was like, well, if I don't feel like doing this or I felt like this was not the best route, I'm just not going to do it because I just feel like, no, I don't feel like it aligns with how I feel. And I think that's like a lot of those things I just learned in the wilderness and just in cultivating my relationship. So when I just think back on it, I think it's often crazy when it comes to just being a lukewarm Christian. A lot of people just think that Jesus did away with the law. But I think we have to like really look at Matthew 5:17 and just realize that he actually came to fulfill it and not abolish it. And so when it comes to the law, those are the things that reflects the ultimate two commandments. Love the Lord thy God with all your heart, your mind, and your soul, and love your neighbor as yourself. And so those commandments, especially the 10 commandments more so, are the ones that really show us how to do that. And so if we just as a whole, as Christians, just think that like doing away with the law is like the best solution, then how are we going to know how we're actually loving people and loving God, right? And so yeah, so all of that just, like I said, it all just cultivates into the whole thing of like heart posture. And that's what I wanted to just delve into, because that's really what Jesus did when he came to fulfill the law. Literally, he's just saying like there's a heart matter that is added on as a caveat to these commandments, to the law. And so I just want you to know that like it's the heart thing. So it doesn't start with what you do on the outward. It starts with what you think or what you feel or your desires, your lusts in your heart. And so it just kind of just, like I said, it intercedes into why he dealt with my heart matter after a while, because it was like, yeah, after going through the things and thinking, okay, if you just stop doing this, stop doing that, or you change this or you change that, but you never change your heart, you don't realize that nothing much has changed, even though you're changing the outward behaviors. That's kind of like how the Pharisees were, right? The hypocrisy was that they were doing a lot of outward things, but inward, nothing was changing. They didn't even connect to the things they were doing outward. They were just checking off things off of a list. And I felt like that's how I spent most of my Christianity, just checking off things off of a list. Like, yeah, I went to church. Yeah, I opened my Bible ever so often, or I knew like, 2 or 3 scriptures. I listened to gospel music. I listened to regular music, but I listened to gospel too. Like, it was just things just to check off, but it wasn't heart things. And so when you really started digging into the heart stuff, now I understand why. And I think that's what really is when it really changed and really got super serious for me. Like I said, being a lukewarm Christian, there's different facets to it. But sometimes we just got to ask ourselves, like, are we sharing the gospel to those around us? Like, are we actually thinking of people more than ourselves? Like, do you have loved ones or friends or even coworkers or just strangers in general that you share the gospel with, or you pray for, or you ask them, really genuinely ask them how they're doing, and actually giving them a word of encouragement or giving them a scripture to uplift them? Those are things that we are responsible to do as believers, as disciples, because again, we're not meant to live alone. We're meant to be a community, to fellowship. And so I think that's one of the things that, we're missing in the church, because most people are being more lukewarm than not, because you're not necessarily thinking of your neighbor, because most people think, oh, you work out your own salvation. And it's like, okay, yeah, in one retrospect, but that's not what that means. It doesn't mean to not share the gospel, to not care about somebody, to not pray for someone, to not assist someone. That's not what that means. It just means that you have to work out your own heart stuff, your own personal salvation in relationship with Christ. But we should all be fellowshipping and helping each other and encouraging each other and uplifting each other, especially because, there's times where life gets hard and times where one might stumble, where you might not be able to have the strength to pray, but you have somebody else with you that can or that will. That's what we are there for. That's what the fellowship is there for. That's what the connectivity is there for. And so, yeah, so we just got to be honest with ourselves and be like, do I really share the gospel? And if so, is it once in a blue moon, or is it like almost on a regular? You know what I mean? Like, if there's always someone, whether it's family, friends, whatever, is there a stranger? You're going to the store, you're going to the gas station, you're going here. Like, am I actually talking to somebody? Am I smiling? Am I making somebody's day better? Even if your day is not. Like, I think the question is, like, are we looking at other people more highly than ourselves? Or are we just looking and saying, well, if I'm not feeling that great today, I'm not going to allow anybody else to feel that great, or I'm not even going to attempt to make anybody else feel better than me. And it's like, we have to not be in that mindset. And we also just got to be honest about the things that need to be improved and changed in our walk. I think that's another thing that also keeps us lukewarm as a whole as well, because most people are just like, don't judge. Like, don't judge me, don't correct me, don't point out my flaws, especially if you don't know me or whatever the case is. And it's like, well, as a body of Christ, like, we are supposed to be actually judging each other righteously in a way that helps us to stay improved and stay encouraged and keep our faith strong and keep us on a great standard with the walk that we're on. And, the thing is, most people throw out Matthew 7:1 about the not judging, but it's like, yeah, but the Bible doesn't say not to judge. It says, don't be judged lest you be judged for that thing. So if you're not taking out the coal out of your eye, but you're only focusing on your brother, that's one thing. But if you took out the coal out your eye and then you're trying to take it out your brother's eye, that's fine. That's what the Bible says. It says to first take it out of your own before you take it out of your brother's. So if you did that, you can see clear enough to, again, righteously judge, right? And so I think that's one of the problems that we also don't, I think we don't actually like to talk about, because, again, we don't want to feel that that feeling that comes with correction. But again, if it's done in love and it's amongst the body, like, that's the best kind of correction that you should want, versus the world, or even, matter of fact, God in the end, right? Like, we don't want the judgment of God, where it's like, we could have had a brother tell us this, that could have been more of an improvement, versus God be like, well, you see, you didn't change that, you didn't fix that, so now this is the consequence. It's like, why not just have somebody that can just, again, lovingly correct you? I think if I had more community and I saw it done right in the church from the beginning, my walk wouldn't have been lukewarm, because my heart posture was not. But I think from what I saw, what I experienced, that definitely deterred me, one, from actually wanting to go even deeper, and two, it also just taught me how to be just like them. So it didn't teach me how to actually be an actual, on fire for Christ's Christian. It just taught me to be the bare minimum. And that's okay, because, again, you're operating in your gifts, you're speaking in tongues, you're doing all the things. When church service is on, it's on. And so I think that was like the true disservice. I really wish that it was way more of this, way more of like really being brothers and sisters in Christ, and really trying to walk this thing out with integrity and help each other do the same, and, pray for each other and really help each other, and really not being perfect. It's not about perfection, but it's about just loving people. I think that's the basis, right? Like, loving people, because when you love people, there's just certain things that you aim to do, that's your intention. And so I think that's one of the things that we're just lacking as a whole, which is why we see so much lukewarm Christians today. Even Paul talks about it in 1 Corinthians 6:1-20, where he's talking about, like, the fact that we will be the ones that judge the world and the angels when we get to heaven. So why would we not judge as saints together? And in this context, he was just talking about, like, righteously judging one another, especially when it comes to, like, lawsuits or disagreements, and putting it keeping it in the church rather than bringing it into the world. And he was really rebuking them, because he was just like, why is there no one that's wise enough in the church that can settle a dispute, versus you bringing out somebody that, is not even of the church, and is just going to further cause more damage and more disagreements amongst brothers and sisters, where we're supposed to be more unified in fellowship. And, even he brought it down to even a point of, like, why not even just suffer the loss, versus, like, suing someone, or bringing someone to court, or, why the need to retaliate, when it's just, again, a cycle of defeat within the kingdom. So when we just really think about how God's view is and how the kingdom view is, it's like, it's not just about us as individuals, it's about us as a collective. And so that's why it's like, not being a stumbling block to your brother or your sister by being lukewarm, by actually taking on the responsibility of being an actual believer in Christ, because, again, a babe in Christ is watching and following. And so not thinking of just ourselves by being comfortable or just, again, coasting, but thinking of the person that's watching or the person that shall come and the one that's looking to us. Because while we always say read our Bibles and, again, like don't follow me, follow Christ. Well, we are the representations of Christ. And so if we're not doing things Christ-like, then who are they supposed to look to? That's like saying that, if the world says it needs representation, so if we need a black president or a black doctor or a black lawyer or black whatever, or a white lawyer or a white whatever for representation, or somebody that's disabled or whatever the representation is, just so that others that are in that same predicament can see that it's possible, then why do we not think as a body of Christ that it's the same representation that's needed? So if we're not really walking like Christ and actually representing him, then how are we supposed to let everybody else know that it's possible for, you to be like him too, if we're as a whole collective not being like him? So I just think it's just, like I said, it's just really important for us to understand, like, being honest where we're at in our walk and being like, yo, if I'm lukewarm, like Jesus said, I just got to be hot or cold. Like, I just got to make a choice, right? Like, knowing that I'm lukewarm or admitting that I'm lukewarm and just staying there is the worst kind. Like, I think it's just an honest opinion, an honest thing to just be like, I either got to be hot or I got to be cold. And I just think, like I said, in my walk while being lukewarm, I just, I think that all wrapped into wanting sermons that reflected that. Like, I didn't really want anything that was going to be, like that was going to be out here telling me about my sin or telling me about whatever. I wanted things that itched my ears. I wanted sermons that, praised and added faith to my efforts. I wanted stuff that was like, telling me about how I'm going to get my goal. God's going to work it out to my goals and like my desires and, making God this like Santa Claus versus actually being like, what do I got to do? Like, what do I got to change? Like, what do I got to go through? What do I got to, transform? What do I got to actually, do to make this walk a pure walk? And even if God never does any of the goals or any of the desires or any of the things that I want, do I still see him correctly? Do I still see him as sovereign? Do I still see him as good? Do I still see him as a good father? Do I still see him as just? Or are those things only predicated on like the fact that he just does what I ask him to do, or he answers the prayers that I'm praying? Like, I think those are just like all questions that I just asked myself. And I just realized I just didn't want to deal with the suffering. I didn't want to wait on God for real. I didn't want to submit to God. I wasn't about dying to my flesh daily. I just was not about not vindicating myself. Like, I was so for justice, right? And God is for justice. He's just. But to the point where I just was like, I want to just do it. I'm not waiting on God, and I'm not standing on his word that says vengeance is his. I'm going to be like, nah, I feel like I should just retaliate or I should just vindicate myself. I wasn't about facing persecution. And to the real point of like, okay, it's one thing to talk about Jesus, but I'm like, yo, to talk about him enough or to stand on certain things and possibly not have deals or possibly not be able to work with certain people or possibly not be in a friend group or possibly not be received by the world in a grander way. Like, I was just like, do I really want to deal with all that and all of that persecution and all the things that really comes with standing firm on Christ? And it's like, when I just look now on it, it's like, I think especially today, social media and all the things, like a lot of people probably deal with the same exact thing. And there's a lot of, that frustration, that fear of like, I won't get as successful as I want to be if I really stand on Christ, because I know Christ brings a lot of weight and division and things that, again, is, like anti-world. And so, my thing is, though, I want to just encourage anybody that probably feels that, is that like, now that I'm fully locked in, honestly, I'm more postured towards obedience. And in that, yes, I've lost a lot of things. Like, I've had to lose family, walk away from family. I had to give up friendships. I've had to walk away from opportunities. I've had to say no to awesome opportunities. I've had to get rid of habits. I've had to eliminate certain music and TV shows that I've watched that were like, again, that just were just really out there. I've had like so many things. I've had to like get rid of a lot of things that I saw as normal, like, horoscopes and all the things that I used to do a lot of, like that were like, a norm for me. Like, yeah, there was a lot of things I've had to give up. But when I look at it now, after I've done it, after I've walked in obedience, after I've cultivated such a close relationship with the Lord, it doesn't matter anymore. Like those things don't matter as much as they did when I was going through it. Yeah, when you're going through it and you're going through the transitions and you're going through the losses, you feel it. Like you feel it in that moment, but after a while, you really do realize like those things didn't matter, especially when you start building relationship and he starts talking to you and starts showing you things, and you realize like there's way more better on the other side than there is on the opposite end. But at first it looks like nothing because you're like, well, I feel like I'm just going downhill, not realizing that you're going downhill just to come up again. And I just want to encourage anybody that's like really on the fence of it, just like really be honest about where you're at, what you're feeling in terms of God, but also just understanding that like none of this stuff matters, because even if you go into the world and you have all this success, like not for nothing, there's just so much destruction and darkness and turmoil of the world that, like, as we know, even the richest people aren't ever happy. And you might be looking and saying, oh no, right now I need the funds, or I need this, or I need that, like I'm in need, so I need to have this stuff. But it's like when you have those stuff though, after a while it's gonna be like, what's next? And you're gonna still feel that void, and you're still gonna feel empty, because really and truly only God, only Christ can fulfill the things that we as humans, we're built with a spiritual yearning for God. And that's why so many people have so many different religions and so many different things that people are searching for, because we're built with that void that can only be filled by God. And if you don't have Christ, I'm telling you that nothing is going to fill it. No matter how much success you get, no matter how much stuff that you do, no matter how much goals you check off your list, like none of that stuff is going to fulfill you. And so, yes, there's things that come with following Christ in terms of just like denying ourselves, really like tossing away the worldview and getting a God view, like so many things, right? But it's all for our betterment. Like it's not a religious thing of like what we are used to seeing in churches, and it was like, oh, you got to give up pants, give up all. It's not those minuscule things that God is going to be out here telling you to give up. He's going to be talking to you about hard things, things that he knows are idols in your life, things that he knows that are destructive for your life that you might not see. And so don't get so caught up in what we're used to seeing in terms of the super religious and the like, the church settings that we're used to seeing. Like, no, a real relationship with Christ allows you to still have swag, allows you to still have creativity, allows you to still be edgy, allows you to still be authentic in the sense of just, again, with a little bit of swag, but it also allows you to be at peace. It allows you to have joy. It allows you to just be content. It allows you to really be, in relationship with Christ and in the knowing of what he wants to do next. Like, I think we just have to understand that there are real benefits to following Christ, even when it looks like on the outward, there's a lot of things that's being stripped away. But trust me, like there's a lot of inner peace, like not going through depression and anxiety and a lot of the things that I was going through all my life, having that level of peace and joy and just contentment. And yeah, you have your moments of, you might feel a little sad, or you might feel a little like, weary. You're going to go through those moments because, the wiles of the enemy and spiritual warfare and all the things are real. But at the end of the day, just the overall peace and joy and just the cultivation and understanding God and really that love that, again, you can't get anywhere else is priceless. And so I just want to encourage anybody today, like I said, that if you've gone through the phase of being lukewarm, or you're going through it and you realize that in this whole thing, like, man, like that's me, I can relate, like just understand that it's not late. for you to just repent. It's not late for you to really go to God and pray in an honest way and just let him know, like, yo, these are my struggles. I need help with this. I need help with like cultivating this. I need help with being more bold. I need help with like getting rid of the fear. Like, these are things that God wants us to be honest about, because again, he is here to help us. And he said, those who are heavy laden, they can come to him and have rest. And so that is just my thing. I also wanted to kind of touch on like the purpose versus calling, because I think a lot of people always talk about that and have that question. And I think what we need to understand, especially when it comes to us Christians, is our purpose versus our calling, right? And our purpose as Christians is to prove that God is just, sovereign, good, all of the things, but also it's to spread the gospel and make more disciples. So that's one of the things that if you're not doing, it can make you really lukewarm. Because like I said before, like sharing the gospel and all that stuff is part of being a Christian and being on fire for Christ, right? So that's our purpose. So when the world says they're looking for purpose, as a Christian, we know what our purpose is. So we don't got to be looking like them. We know what our purpose is. It's to prove God is who he says he is, and what his word says he is, by our life and the glorification that comes from that. And also to spread the gospel and to make more disciples. That's our purpose. Now, your calling is going to change, and it can change. It can be the same. It can be multiple things. But the calling is really just like, it goes hand in hand with your talents and your gifts and how God chooses to use that. But it also just ties into your purpose. So a lot of the times, like, you can be really good at music and all the things, and that just ties into your purpose of, again, to spread the gospel, to prove God is who he is, to glorify God. And so just understanding that difference between purpose versus calling is so important. And don't be searching for a purpose as a believer when you already know this is what your purpose is. Now, your calling, this is where you might have to, again, you pray, you fast, you really seek God on what that is. And your hands will tell you a lot of the times too, like what you're good at, what are your spiritual gifts? What are your gifts and talents and skills? Like, those are things that you can take to God, and you both can walk that through and walk that out. But like I said, like, that's your purpose versus your calling. And yeah, so I really hope that this really helped someone. I definitely wanted to share just my whole experience as just, again, like I said, I'm recovering. I'm recovering and have recovered, I should say, from being a lukewarm Christian. I think I really have recovered. I can say that now in this stage, because I don't have the desire to not be for Christ. I don't have the desire to not be obedient. I don't have the desire to really be more focused on the world stuff than I am on kingdom stuff. And being focused on kingdom stuff doesn't mean that you're not in the world. It just means you're not of it. And so God can still use you like he uses the world, like the world is being used. God can still bless you financially, or bless you with health, or bless you with all the things, if that's in his will. So it's not to say that we're like this, extraterrestrial thing. But it is just to say that, like, we're more focused on what God wants and what's his will than we are our own, and what the world says is success, or the world says is this, or the world says is that. So yeah, so I really pray that this helps somebody. And yeah, so as I always do, I want to end off the podcast with a verse of the day. And so as I've mentioned a little bit before, the verse of the day is going to be Revelation 3:16. And basically it says, I know your works, you are neither cold nor hot. Would rather that you were either cold or hot. So because you are lukewarm, not hot or cold, I will spit you out of my mouth. I think we need to understand what's the difference between hot versus cold. So hot is to be passionate and fervent in spirit and serving God's kingdom with the whole heart. And then to be cold is actually to abandon the faith and to be an unbeliever. So clearly Jesus was saying it's best you either be an unbeliever and don't even be a part of the faith than to be lukewarm. And it's best for you to actually be passionate and fervent for the Lord than to be lukewarm. But either or, it just shows you, if he's saying to abandon the faith and actually be an unbeliever, that just shows you how much of a lukewarmity he hates, right? So it's like, again, if you feel like you, for whatever reason, because there's so many reasons why people can be lukewarm Christians. Like I said, it could just be what you've seen and you've just replicated that. It could be that you low key want to be a part of the world and the worldly successes, and you're walking more carnally than you are spiritually, and so you're just like, I don't want to. I don't want to jeopardize any of the worldly things and the successful things that I want to be a part of. It could be that you're low key angry at God for your life and just the things you've gone through. And so you're really rejecting him, but you're doing it through rebellion. Like so many different reasons. Whatever the reason is, like I said, just repent, go to God. He's loving, he's caring, he's waiting for you to just embrace him. And he's ready to just, again, walk you through this. And so if you just do that and just, again, just be on fire for him in whatever way that you can, like that is really what it's all about. Like we're here to steward the things that God has given us, the abilities through gifts or talents or whatever, all of the things to just bring him glory. So I just want to say again, I really pray that this episode has helped somebody. I hope that it has, given revelation to anybody who might have not even known that being a lukewarm Christian actually, embodied any of these things. I just pray that my story has helped anybody. Whatever it is, I just really hope that this episode definitely does bring about a change, and it helps you. Again, I just love just seeing your comments, whether it's on the podcast or it's on YouTube. Definitely leave your comments. Let me know what you think about this. Have you been lukewarm? Have you known anybody that's been lukewarm? Are you surprised by any of these things being lukewarm? And just let me know in the comments. I just love to see your thoughts. And let's build this thing and walk this thing out the right way, on fire for the Lord. And if you have not subscribed, be sure to subscribe to this channel and be sure to like and comment and share this with anybody that needs it. And thank you guys for tuning in this far. And I will see you guys again next time. Love you.